This individual is talking to me about a process. They've had several months to look at this budget. You can't just be a no. You have to find ways to actually come up with solutions so that we can actually have a real debate.
America, Chicago is collapsing in real time, and we're watching it happen because they elected an elementary school teacher to manage a $16.7 billion budget. Mayor Brandon Johnson is so desperate and incompetent that he wants to tax everything under the sun. We're talking about taxing employees, cloud computing, social media, and even grocery stores. Einstein would be envious of his brilliant ideas to destroy what's left of Chicago's economy. But here's what's really pathetic. While Johnson is desperately trying to squeeze more money out of taxpayers, Chicago public schools just got exposed for wasting $7.7 million on luxury travel, including safaris and hot air balloon rides. Because here's what nobody wants to admit. This is what happens when you elect somebody with zero business experience to manage a massive city budget.
Some key Chicago City Council members are urging Mayor Brandon Johnson to slow down on his $16.7 billion budget proposal.
What is up, guys? Tyson Dela Cruz here. Thank you so much for rocking with me. We're literally watching Chicago collapse because they put an elementary school teacher in charge of $1 billion. Let me break down just how desperate and incompetent Brandon Mohawk Johnson really is by going through his ridiculous tax proposals that would make even the most liberal Democrats cringe. This guy is literally trying to tax everything that moves in Chicago.
There are other controversial taxes, including a cloud computing tax and a first-of-its-kind social media tax.
Think about how stupid this is. Johnson wants to tax businesses for using cloud computing services and social media platforms. That is like taxing companies for using electricity or having telephones.
Dowell is opposed to the employee head tax, which would charge companies with more than 100 employees $21 per employee per month.
But wait, it gets even worse. Johnson wants to charge companies $21 per employee per month just for having workers in Chicago. So if you're a business with 200 employees, you pay an extra $4,200 per month just for having the privilege to provide jobs for Chicago residents. This, my friends, is the kind of brilliant economic policy you get when you elect an elementary school teacher to run a major city. Instead of trying to cut wasteful spending, he's trying to tax businesses out of existence. Here's just how bad Brandon Johnson leadership has become. Even his own Democratic city council members are rejecting this insane budget proposals. When Democrats in Chicago think your tax ideas are too extreme, you've completely lost it.
The city council has overwhelmingly rejected a key component of Mayor Brandon Johnson's 2026 budget. This was a 25-10 vote in the Finance Committee, striking down $600 million in new taxes.
That is not even close. Johnson got absolutely destroyed by his own party because his ideas are so ridiculous that even Chicago Democrats won't support them.
You can't just be a no. You can't just be a no. You have to find ways to actually come up with solutions so that we can actually have a real debate.
Listen to this whining. You can't just be no. You have to find ways to actually come up with solutions. Really? How about this solution, Brandon Mohawk Johnson? Stop wasting taxpayer money on luxury travel and unnecessary programs. Then you won't need to tax everything that moves.
These individuals are talking to me about a process. They've had several months to look at this budget. We started this process way back in April. They've had the budget for more than a month. Check this out. Not one new proposal from any of them.
Johnson is blaming the aldermen for not providing alternatives to his terrible ideas. Here's an alternative, genius. Cut spending instead of raising taxes. But that will require actual leadership skills, which Brandon Johnson clearly doesn't have. While Johnson is desperately trying to squeeze more tax money out of Chicago residents, let me tell you about the massive spending scandal that just got exposed at Chicago public schools. They wasted $7.7 million on luxury travel while claiming they need more money for education.
A scathing report from the Chicago Public Schools Inspector General questions millions of dollars spent on travel by city educators.
The Inspector General didn't slice up any words here. They called it travel abuse. We're talking about educators spending tax money on luxury hotels, limousine rides, and international trips that had nothing to do with education.
Some examples: an educator spent $945 a night on a hotel for a Las Vegas conference booked last minute. A professional development trip to South Africa included a wildlife tour that didn't appear to have any educational value.
These people were literally going on vacation with taxpayer money, while Johnson claims his city needs more revenue.
District travel spending more than doubled between 2019 and 2024. And keep in mind that CPS announced earlier this year that it faced a more than $700 million budget hole.
This is the kind of fiscal responsibility you get when Democrats run school systems, spend money on safaris while claiming they need more funding for children. Let me explain exactly why Brandon Johnson is such a disaster as mayor. This is what happens, you guys. Chicago, this is what happens when you elect somebody with zero business experience to manage a $16.7 billion budget.
But that's going to create the kind of atmosphere that will make it difficult for this mayor to pass a budget that doesn't include any cuts and efficiencies.
But Brandon Johnson refuses to cut spending because he doesn't understand basic economics.
People will open their tax bill and they'll get angry and they'll call their elected official and they'll say, what's going on here? Why did my bills go up? They don't want to hear that elected official say, well, you know, we're going to tax you even more this year, but don't worry about it.
And Johnson's solution is to tax them even more. This is political suicide. But Johnson is too incompetent to understand basic cause and effect. Big businesses and budgets like this take years to turn around. But Johnson thinks he can solve everything by taxing cloud computing and social media. This is elementary school level thinking applied to complex municipal finances. Now let me tell you about another one of Johnson's brilliant ideas. Raiding TIFF funds that are supposed to be used for neighborhood development and using them to plug budget holes. This just shows how desperate and short-sighted his leadership really is.
$500 million of raided TIFF funds meant for constructing, repairing schools and school infrastructure are going to CPS to fund the CTU's latest contract and pay for pensions.
This, my friends, is classic robbing Peter to pay Paul on a massive scale.
Chicago is the only municipality in Illinois that uses TIF funds as slush funds for operating expenses. That's not their intended purpose.
Every other city in the state uses these funds for their intended purpose, economic development and infrastructure. But Johnson treats it like his own personal piggy bank.
For every $1, for example, of TIF funds that come out of the Inglewood TIF, the city of Chicago only gets 23 cents on that. The Chicago Public Schools get 50 cents.
When Johnson raids TIF funds from neighborhoods like Inglewood, those communities lose money that was supposed to be invested into their development. This means no new grocery stores, no affordable housing, no infrastructure improvements. Also, Mayor Brandon Johnson can avoid making tough budget decisions. Johnson's tax everything approach is driving businesses out of Chicago faster than you can say head tax. When you tax companies for having employees, using cloud computing and posting on social media, you're basically telling them to leave.
The mayor is additionally floating $1.3 billion in borrowing for infrastructure spending. A lot of that would go to alders to use for their desired projects in their wards.
This, my friends, is classic Chicago corruption. Raise taxes on businesses while borrowing money for political favors. The employee head tax is particularly stupid because it literally punishes companies for creating jobs. If you're a business owner, why would you hire more people in Chicago if each employee costs an extra $252 per year in just head tax? This is the kind of economic literacy you get when you elect somebody who's never run a business or managed a budget bigger than a classroom supply fund. Johnson thinks money just magically appears when you raise taxes without understanding that businesses and taxpayers have options. We're literally watching Chicago collapse in real time because Chicago, you elected an elementary school teacher to manage a complex budget. Poor accountability, overspending, and zero oversight have led to this complete failure of leadership.
City has until the end of the year to approve a budget, so why fast track it?
Even Johnson's own allies are asking why he's trying to fast track this disaster of a budget. The answer, my friends, is simple. He knows his ideas are so bad and stupid that the longer that people have to think about them, the more opposition he'll face. Johnson's approach to budgeting is like a kid with a credit card. When you run out of money, just find new things to tax and new ways to borrow. There's no consideration of long-term consequences or economic impact here. The fact that Chicago public schools wasted $7.7 million on luxury travel, while Johnson claims the city needs more revenue, shows the complete lack of accountability in Chicago government. They're not broke because they don't have enough money. They're broke because they waste the money that they have. America, Brandon Mohawk Johnson's budget disaster perfectly illustrates what happens when you elect somebody completely unqualified to manage a major city. His solution to every problem is to raise taxes and borrow more money while completely ignoring the wasteful spending that created this chaos. Taxing employees, cloud computing, social media, and everything else that moves isn't an economic policy. It's economic suicide. Johnson is literally driving businesses and taxpayers out of Chicago with his desperate tax grab. Meanwhile, Chicago public schools waste millions on luxury travel and safaris while claiming they need more money for education. This is the kind of fiscal responsibility you get when Democrats run government. Spend money on vacations while demanding higher taxes. The city council's overwhelming rejection of Johnson's tax proposal shows that even Chicago Democrats think his ideas are too extreme. When you've lost your own party in one of the most liberal cities in America, you've completely failed as a leader. Johnson's raid of TIF funds meant for neighborhood development shows his complete disregard for communities that elected him. He's stealing money from economic development to fund the teachers' union contracts and government pensions. We're watching Chicago collapse because they put someone with elementary school level thinking in charge of a $16.7 billion budget. This is what happens when you prioritize political correctness over competent leadership. Let me know what you think about this. Drop it down in the comment section down below. Smash the like button if you kindly would. Share, subscribe, and as always, guys, I'll catch you on the next one.